Fresco beverage, orange soda. Does the body good. I can totally count orange soda as a fruit group. How is everybody doing? It is 7:17, a little bit late, but we are talking about tonight. We we have big things and little things, and I talk about this all the time, and that's because this is how I view things, and this is how I approach almost everything. So if we're working around the house and there's things that we have to get done, and we have a list of things that need to get done, there's a priority to that list. There's things that have to get done. Like, okay, if you're figuring out things that you need to get done, okay, you have to have, like, if you have to survive, you have to have food and shelter, fire and shelter and stuff. And so some of those things are higher on the list than others. And it's the same thing when you go looking for power. I mean, not according to the internet. no matter what I post on the internet, I've always done the wrong thing. And there's so much power to be had from silly things like plug gap, indexing plugs, different types of plugs, those kinds of things. There are a lot of things that we do that we test, like the piston flip is a common thing, the pin offset thing that I did. These things, push rod length, when I did a test on push rod length for the LS, which essentially what it does on the LS, it does a different thing on other things that have a different style rocker. But on a bolt down rocker, it decides the preload on the push rod. So that decides, it effectively turns a push rod, or on the lifter, it effectively turns a standard travel lifter into a short travel lifter, makes it more effective in that it gets rid of a bunch of aerated oil. So it's not, a lot of guys went down a different path on this. They're like, oh yeah, that push rod weighs more and it's going to be more problematic and all that stuff. And it's like, you're missing the point of this whole thing. And then I would get other people that would argue the other end of that spectrum is like, you can't change power with push rods. Like, well, we're not changing power specifically with push rods. I mean, that's the thing that we're changing, but really the push rod is changing something else. But there's a lot of these things, mass air meters, bigger mass air meters, or reprogram mass air meters. So sometimes, and I've had good luck with some of those, especially back in the Ford days. Guys now where you have complete control of the air, fuel, and timing and all that, obviously they would laugh at that kind of stuff. And quite honestly, I probably would run a speed density thing now, unless it was something that I was driving around every day. Quite honestly, I think a mass air combination is better. I think it's better for drivability. But, we have come a long way, and getting rid of the meter itself is a good idea. Things like these throttle body airfoils. Now, I know, the airfoils that you put in for the tune port stuff and later on the LT1 stuff, they had those because they had similar throttle bodies from GM. And what it did was just make the throttle body flow better. Port matching is another one of these things that, can or can't do things. Throttle body spacers, putting a spacer or a swirly spacer or something like that, before or after the throttle body, these tornado things, magnets, there are a lot of things that, guys would argue, okay, this does work in the same way that there is, movement, that the continents are shifting. But are they shifting enough for us to feel it? And do they, away from each other? I'm not talking about the, shifting of tectonic plates and earthquakes and things like that, especially in California, we have that a lot. But I'm talking about drifting away from each other. So yes, that's happening. And yes, a spark plug, changing the gap on the spark plug can change something. But what I'm talking about when I'm looking at these things is like, did it make power? Because that's what guys care about. And even irrespective of that, let's say that we ran a combination where we changed the plug gap, and it wasn't a situation where we changed the plug gap and it just cured a misfire, because we know that that's going to have big power. If we're able to cure a misfire, whether by a coil or a wire or a spark plug, and we had a misfire and then now we don't, particularly on a turbo motor, because if we have a misfire on a turbo combination, the result can be like exaggerated. because we can lose a bigger amount by doing that. And so therefore we can gain a bigger amount by doing that. But it's not the spark plug that's doing that. Again, it's like the push rod change. Okay, it's not the push rod technically that's changing the power. It's something else. It's the fact that we made it into a different kind of lifter style. Same thing with spark plug. If we change the gap on the spark plug and we cure a misfire, curing the misfire is the issue. And then so now you're just making the power that the motor should, because now it's not misfiring. And that works. And a lot of these things do work. A lot of these things, you could argue that things, I indexed my plug on my big block Chevelle or whatever, and it did this and this and this. Okay. I would want to sit down and challenge that and see what happened in the direct back-to-back test, because on the dyno it doesn't show anything. But even if it did, let's say it showed 5 horsepower. Let's say we had a situation where we changed something and it changed 5 horsepower. And when I do these tests to find that stuff out, because I'm curious personally to find out, because I know that a lot of these guys are going to say, oh yeah, but if you add this up and this up and this up and this up, I'm like, yeah, but if they're all 0 and you add all of them together, it's still 0. All you've done is waste more of your time. You're not adding 1 and 2 and 5 and 10 and 8, and it doesn't work like that. I remember going through this way back when we were talking about the 5-liter Ford. You're like, yeah, underdrive pulleys are worth 8 and a throttle body's worth 6 and an intake is worth this much and all the 160-degree thermostat and the mass aerometer and all these things. You add all these things up, pretty soon from just bolting little things on, you have like a 400 horsepower motor, except it never does that. And so part of that, it was in the advertising that guys were saying things that may or may not have been true in their testing. But irrespective of that, when you're looking at these things that may or may not do anything, an equal length shorty header versus just a normal length shorty header, will assume that you're throwing out the possibility that on a 5-liter Mustang that the equal length shorties are just going to burn your spark plug wires and then it's going to misfire. If you get rid of that, is there a difference between an equal length shorty and an unequal length shorty? Our testing says no. But even if there was, my question is, should you be looking at that? No. Or when should you be looking at it is actually a better thing. So when should you be looking for the little things? You should be looking for the little things after you have exhausted your search for all of the big things. Case in point, if a guy goes to a wrecking yard and goes and grabs like an LS motor from the wrecking yard, 4.8, 5.3, 6.0, whatever they get lucky and find, and they're adding a turbo, and then so what are the things what things should they be concerned about? And I'm thinking about doing this like, LS motors for beginners, because the guys that have already done this and know what to do and know how to succeed at this are not the guys that I would do a video for, because they're not going to listen to me anyways. They already know everything. So they're not going to watch and go, oh yeah, well, Richard did this just works out fine. But a guy who's brand new to it, that's looking for information, that's the kind of guy I want to do a video for, because he doesn't know. So he shouldn't be caring about pushrod length, other than the fact that if he puts a camshaft in it, he doesn't want to have lash. So he doesn't want the pushrod length to be too short, nor does he want it to be too long. But he has a pretty big window, pretty big sweet spot where things are going to work. But what should he be concerned about? He's got an LS. He's going to put it in something. So what thing should he be worried about? Should he be worried about whether he should run truck exhaust manifolds or headers? No. Should he be worried about mandrel bends? No. Should he be worried about the size of his intercooler? I would argue yes. But I would argue based on information that I got from him on what his power output was. So if he is going to do a turbo thing, the first thing that I would want to know from him is, what power output are you looking at? That's going to determine the turbo. Not the camshaft, not the size of the motor, none of that stuff. What is your power output? Okay, you got that. Once you know that and you've chosen your turbo size, what's the next thing that people will pick? What's the next things what is the next thing people should be looking at? If you got it, go ahead. I'm going to wait for a couple of answers. So if a guy goes to the wrecking yard, he's going to do a turbo LS, and he decides on getting the right size turbo. Let's say he wants to make 700 horsepower, so he picks a GT45. What's the next thing he should be interested in? What should he be concerned with when he gets that motor? And I mean, obviously, whether it runs or not, but let's say that it is a runner. What's the next thing? Frosty cold beverage. These are Jarritos. These are good. Ring gap. Ring gap is good. That's very important, but it's behind this other thing. What two things do you need to make power? Besides Brady, huh? What are you doing, huh? What two things do you need? Come on. Get up here. Hello, what are you doing? Hello. Good baby. Oh, this. Fuel and air. There, Alan's got it right. So, if a turbo is giving us the air, what does he need? He needs a fuel pump and injectors. That's right. So these guys are listening. That's the next thing that you need. So if you know what turbo you pick, because you decided on some kind of power level, I want to make 700 horsepower. A guy that decides a turbo combination only wants to make 700 horsepower is definitely later on, if he never breaks his combination, he's putting a bigger turbo on. I guarantee he's going up to an S475 or 7875 DS Racing turbo. He's going to do that. Because if he has a 700 horsepower turbo and he runs that, he's going to want 1,000 horsepower turbo. So really, you should just get that to begin with. But let's say that he stays with 700. The thing that he needs now that he's chosen his air delivery mechanism, now he needs fuel. So he needs enough fuel to support 700 horsepower. And because he's trying to make 700 horsepower, he should put enough fuel in to make 1,000 horsepower. Because we all know that that's where he's going. This is just like the guy that's only going to run 7 pounds. We all know that he's not going to run 7 pounds. And it's better not to try to limit yourself with fuel anyway. You don't want to put 700 horsepower worth of injector in. You want to put 1,000 horsepower worth of injector in. So then that becomes your limit. Then if you're going to put the 1,000 horsepower turbo in, you're like, okay, if I'm going to get serious about this, I got to get serious about this and start doing things. So once he has his fuel injectors, he's going to put 80s in it, 80-pound injectors in it. He needs a fuel pump or fuel pumps. So he has to have the ability to supply the amount of fuel usage that he will have under boost. He obviously is going to need tuning beyond that. We'll assume that he's going to put it on to begin with, we'll assume that he's going to put it on a stock motor. He's got a GT45, he's got a stock 5.3, he's got injectors, he's got a pump, he's going to need to have it tuned. Those are all what I would call big things. Those are like mandatory things. I would argue that the ring gap, as much as I tell people that ring gap should be a mandatory thing, it's not for most people. And it hasn't been for me. I still have not done the ring gap on the L33, and we've run boost on it several times. But I know, and I fully accept the consequences of my actions. If it breaks, that's on me, and I'm okay with that. And so should everybody else. So if you don't do it, that's on you. If you're going to take it apart to do something with it anyway, like to put, because then the other things that you do, like I always strongly recommend ring gap, head studs. Since you have it apart, you're going to put I would put different head gaskets on it. And I would do it like the Super Richie razor blade rebuild where you scrape stuff with a razor blade, maybe reseat the valves with just lapping compound and a drill because it's so easy and takes 15 or 20 minutes. It's like nothing. And then so a lot of times it doesn't do anything because they're sealing anyways. And all this stuff has happened so fast that you don't gain any power from that. It just makes me feel better. Makes me feel like I took my cylinder heads to the machine shop and put them back on there. Also, when you do that, you'll notice you can also then look for big things. So you can look for blown head gaskets and stuff. I would recommend head studs, and I like ARP stuff. I don't like the China stuff. I like ARP stuff. It's the one thing that I would spend money on, and I would do it on a boosted application, especially if it's something that I want to run a long time, especially if it's something that I knew later on I was going to go to 1,000 horsepower. Again, We have run boost with stock head bolts, with unopened motors, with things that have never been replaced. We've done all that, and that's fine. And you can do that. And what guys want, and I get this all the time, is they want permission to do that. Like I can tell them what their unopened motor ring gap is and whether or not they're going to have a problem. But what they're looking for in those instances is a scapegoat. So they say, well, Richard told me it was going to be okay. So when it blew up, that's actually on Richard. It's not, because Richard told you not to do that. And then also Richard told you that he doesn't know what your ring gap is. And the big thing in all this, even more than those things, is that Richard has no idea what your tune is and whether you did all that right. And probably not. If you're a guy that's wanting to circumvent that anyways, you're probably not a guy that's going to spend the money and get it tuned properly. You should do that. The tuning is a critical thing. You have to do that, particularly on a boosted application. The tune has to be right, and by a good guy that knows what he's doing and understands how to put parameters in there that, hey, this needs to happen if the temperature heats up, the water temperature heats up, if the air temperature heats up. But there's nothing really they can do for a clogged injector. If that happens, that happens. That's a bad deal. But they need to take into consideration the other things. So those are all big things. So, what kind of muffler setup the guy uses, what exhaust he uses. Does he, again, the mandrel bend thing. The one thing that I would say is very important, and a lot of guys think that this is a small thing, is that you should have a cold air intake on your turbo setup. You should not be drawing air from under the engine compartment. A closed hood engine compartment can easily be 150 degrees inside there. It can be more than that, depending on what the temperature is coming through your radiator. So if your turbo is drawing air from anywhere near the fan flow from your radiator, it could be closer to 200 degrees. So you're starting off with 200 degree air. That's why a cold air setup is so important. A lot of guys do not do that, and then they wonder why things, why they go awry. You can get away with a lot more if you have cold air, and if you have proper tuning, and you have enough fuel, and you're not trying to run all the boosts. You're trying to run some of the boosts and go out and have fun with that. But the success of that, and we haven't even started talking about camshafts yet. So if a guy wants a camshaft with that, then he needs a cam and springs, more than likely. He needs a cam and springs, and then he needs to decide when you go into the cam, when you step up to the next cam level, the next level of performance with the camshaft, you now need to be concerned about other things too. The camshaft is going to make more power. You're going to make more power than you made with just the turbo. You're going to make more power at the same boost, or the same power at less boost. But as with choosing a camshaft with your NA motor, same thing. Does it work with your stock converter? Does it work with your gearing? How is it going to idle? How's the turbo response going to be? Do I need a stage 7 camshaft? You don't. You should pick a small camshaft. And it doesn't have to be a turbo camshaft. Again, this is one of the things that I want to cover is, guys, especially new guys that are new that have no idea. They know I'm getting a turbo, so obviously I need this thing over here that they call a turbo cam. I need a turbo cam. And I have yet to see a turbo cam that I would pick over something like my low buck truck cam or a Truck Norris or Chopper or something small. I have yet to see a turbo cam that I would pick that's like that, because that's what I would pick. I would pick a camshaft because a camshaft doesn't care that it's turbocharged or nitrous or supercharged or whatever. It knows what it's going to do, and it does that NA. And then when you just add boost to that, you just add boost to that. So if you have a turbo combination and you pick a camshaft that helps low speed power in anything, not just an LS, a 5-liter Ford, a small block Chevy, a big block, whatever it is, and it helps low speed power, it's going to help turbo response. And so that's what you're looking for. If that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for turbo response, if you're looking for 8,000 RPM and you don't care about what happens down here at 3,000 or whatever, you're looking for 8,000, you want to rev that high, you put a short router manifold on it, you put lots of camshaft in it, you put a rising boost curve in it, and man, you're charging hard on the big end, and that works too. But you would pick that based on your needs for what you're trying to achieve, and same thing with the camshaft. Most guys, I would say, would be much happier with a responsive turbo and a small camshaft. And that's why I try to steer them toward that. And then if they want more power, it's just like, oh, well, hey, 7 pounds, it'll be better than 7 pounds, like 10, and then 15, and then whatever the turbo will do, it's all the way up. That's why we always err on the more side on the fuel pump and the fuel injectors, and the safety of the tune and then octane. There's all sorts of other little things that we need to talk about. But before you do that, pick all the big things correctly, and then you can go around and nitpick all the stuff. Like I need a ball bearing turbo for response. No, you need a long runner intake manifold and a camshaft, because the ball bearing turbo isn't going to make anywhere near the difference either one of those other two things do. So again, of the three of those things, pick the two that'll make a big difference, and then the other thing is just pick that if you want to spend lots of money. Okay, here we go. Okay, do spark plugs make a difference in power if there is no misfire? Spark plugs are a little thing. So I'm going to scroll in. Eric Rich, today's girlfriend's day? Man. Utah's in the house. You're an underwater cowboy? Are you like a oil rig, like an underwater welder or something? Because that would be awesome. Have you used JGR break-in oil for a flat tap camshaft engine, or is there an oil you can recommend? We've used Lucas break-in oil, Driven comp, which I think was a Driven or a Gibbs oil. It's more important that you just use something that has, like for the break-in stuff on a flat tap cam, we put, I go through a procedure that I use on a break-in cam. We usually go down in spring rate. So if it's a dual spring, we'll take out the inner spring. I put lots of zinc in it, a zinc additive, a high zinc break-in oil. Also, when I'm putting it together, I put Moly assembly lube on all the cam lobes and on the bottom of the lifters. And then we pre-lube the engine with a drill and an oil pump drive. We just do everything that we can to try to make sure the flat tappet camshaft is happy. It seems like initially if you break it in and you can get everything, happy and working together, then when we put the spring rate back on and start working it, we seem to have pretty good luck like that. I grew up watching Aussie women swimming, still love it. Yeah, they are legit. If you watch the Olympics, they're doing very, very well. And I think it's amazing. I think it's cool that they have a rivalry with the United States. I think that's good for the sport. It's good for them. It's good for them when they win and they get all excited, and good for the USA when they win and they get all excited. I think it's awesome. I think that the Olympics for me is very inspiring. It inspired me to go out and try something, to try to do this run that I have never done. Even when I was young and I was running cross country and stuff, I had never done this particular run before. And after doing one of the hills that I had done, I told my wife, I said, the next thing is this big tower run. She's like, I think you could do it. I said, I don't think I can. I said, it's really far and it has lots of hills. And I said, and I don't know that I have that. But the Olympics for me is very inspiring. Not so much for me, it's less about the achievement. I mean, it's awesome to watch Simone Biles or Katie Ledecky and watch people that are like the very best of anybody that's ever done this. That's awesome too. But what inspires me is that I know that, well, I don't know because I'm not an Olympic champion, but the amount of work that went into helping them achieve whatever they achieved, even people that didn't win gold medals or win championships or whatever, but the amount of sacrifice that these people made to just get there and be part of that is amazing. So it just inspires me to go out and run and I was able to go do this hill run. My wife was gone on a trip, and the day before I'm like, tomorrow morning I'm getting up early because it's going to be cooler, so the air will be better. So I'm going to go try it. I'm going to go as far as I can. If I can't make it all the way up, then I just walk back down and go, okay, at least I know where my mark is. And next time I'll try to go a little farther, but I was able to go all the way up and ran back down. And I'm like, dude, king of the world. I should really be in the Olympics, I think. But I know what it's like, because I remember training. The last thing that I did series training for was when I was doing American Ninja Warrior. And when I first started that, sitting on the couch watching with my kids, I was like, they're like, Daddy, why don't you go? Because I'd been watching this since when Ninja Warrior first started, even before it started as the TV show. They had it in Japan. It was called Sasuke, and it was in Japan. And I was watching Brent and those guys do that there. And it was awesome. And we're sitting there watching it because I'd watch it all the time. And they're like, Daddy, why don't you go do that? You should go try that. I'm like, first of all, I'm 100 years old. And the next thing is I'm also way out of shape, even though I was an athlete for most of my life. But they're like, oh, you should go do that. And so I, went to the gym and couldn't do 3 pull-ups. And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty far away. But then after you train, I got to where I was very, very good at pull-ups. I could do 40 pull-ups in 45 seconds. So it was a lot. And I built the salmon ladder and did all this stuff. And it was very cool to be able to do things that, because I did more than anybody that was in that gym when we were doing the pull-up contest. Only because that's all that I worked on. I worked on all over, that sort of overhead stuff. But going there and meeting these young kids that were doing it, these 20-something guys, they were amazing. There were guys there who could do one-handed pull-ups. There's a guy there that could do a one-handed salmon ladder. So it may not mean a lot of things may not mean something to a lot of guys, but doing a salmon ladder is the one where they have the bar and they go up and they jump up to the next rung. There's a guy there I've only ever seen one guy be able to do this, but he could do it one-armed, which that's gangster. And so it's when you get that sort of incentive, it's really cool. And that's kind of what the Olympics do for me. I wouldn't worry super much about the break-in oil. Just make sure it has zinc. You change it soon after the break-in. Amsoil has good stuff. I've heard people say use zinc additive for flat tapping cams. Yeah, you should use zinc. Person recommends JGR break-in oil for the first startup and doing the camshaft break. And anything that they're recommending is something that they have a deal with, somebody they have a deal with. There are lots of good break-in oils. There are lots of break-in additives. Just do everything that you can to make sure that it's all going to work. All you got to do is flip them pistons. That's right. The Coriolis effect makes no appreciable difference in US V8 engines. I've been around. Okay. If you're in NASCAR, you look at that stuff. If you're in NASCAR, you look at what? Plug gap? If you're at the highest level of motorsports, you start looking at the little things that we're talking about. But a guy that makes that argument that's for the less than 1% of the people that we're talking about. We're not talking about anybody here that would watch this channel that is doing that. No NASCAR engine builder. Richard Childress is not watching this channel to get information about how to do it, how to make power with an engine. They already know how to do that. So at Formula One or NASCAR or the Super Touring stuff in Australia or Pro Stock, that kind of stuff, you get to a point where everything matters, where you're looking for onesies and twosies, and you have to look for onesies and twosies because you've already gotten the big stuff. But a guy going to the wrecking yard and getting a turbo LS is not looking for onesies and twosies. He's looking for, for hundreds. Have you tried the ultra low ram on a 6-liter LS turbo? It doesn't make any difference what displacement it is, but I have tried the ultra low ram, and we know what it does. Ring gap driving style. Cooling it properly, RPM range. I want to start with 500, get used to it, turn it up to 700, and then get used to it. That is the problem, is that it like anything, it's like, oh, this thing feels really fast. And then you're like, it doesn't really feel that fast anymore because you get used to it. I can tell you when I was driving the Silver State race, we're driving, in the Mustang, it went as fast as 193 or 4 miles an hour. But I think I averaged 167 for that race. And when you're going that speed for that long, when you slow down to like 55, it feels like you could just open the door and get out. I mean, it's the sensation of speed is dramatically different. Yeah, fuel pump, spark plug, fuel injectors, valve spring cams. They are good. I've been getting Mexican food the same place for over 20 years and I always go. Yeah, they are good. That I like when we have a couple of local places here, and whenever we go get those, and even when we go, we have a Mexican market that's right around the corner where we get a bunch of stuff, and we always get them when we have Mexican food because it just seems like it goes good together, right? So Eric, what's your flavor? Do you like? I had an orange, but they have lots of different ones. The lime's good, and the pineapple. Baby shark, what's going on? Just like nitrous, you start with 150, and then you keep adding more. All of a sudden, you're at 300. 300 is a big shot. Thousand horsepower requires new fuel pump versus 700. Could have gone with an auxiliary booster. Yeah, like a boosted pump or something. I would say that people should put if you're trying to do 1,000 horsepower, unless you're trying to do it on like the most extreme budget, or if you're trying to do 700 horsepower, I'd say just you should get enough to do 1,000 because that's where you're going. I mean and having a 700 horsepower pump and wanting 1,000, that's not a good situation. But having 1,000 horsepower pump and only wanting 700, that's good because eventually you're going to get there. And having the 1,000 horsepower pump is not going to do anything detrimental to you for a 700 horsepower combination. Do you do remote tuning? No, I'm not really a tuner. I got a 5.3 with a spun cam bearing for free. Nice. Did it hurt the block though? I had to cut the bearing off the cam to get the cam out. Block looks like getting machine shop to check her out. Yeah, let me know what they say. I think now for a long time, and I remember talking to bearing manufacturers, I'm like, you need to have oversized service bearings for these blocks because everyone's throwing these blocks away when there's a spun bearing because there wasn't the service replacement for that when they have to bore that thing out. None of the bearing manufacturers made this. And this was long ago. I'm sure that that's changed by now, but it's something that you want to think about. Copper head gaskets require low RA numbers like MLS head gaskets. You know, I don't think that they do because I think that the copper is a lot softer. And I think that like a graphite gasket, it probably would go into the irregularities in the surface. But I don't know for sure. I never use a copper head gasket on anything. I always use MLS head gaskets on stuff. How tight have you run the quench on LS motor? I don't know what the tightest would be. This 5.3 that we have has a 41 gasket on it, but I don't know where it is. I don't know where it is on the deck. I think somewhere in the 30s probably. Richard, 5.3 with a 4-inch crank, 317 heads, LS3 intake, Trek Norris cam, 6-speed, S480, Gargoyles 900 wheel horsepower. Well, the problems I can see is one, an LS3 intake is not going to go on 317 heads. An LS3 intake is a rec port intake manifold, and 317 heads are cathedral port intake. An S480 will do 950 wheel horsepower. So anything else that you have in your combination there will make 950 horsepower because the turbo will do that. You don't need and you also don't need a 4-inch crank to do that. You could just do it with a 5.3. It'll be softer on the spool up, obviously, but it doesn't have to be bigger. It doesn't have to be like a 370 something inch or 80 inch, depending on how big you've done the bore. I like it when a guy brings you a buddy's rusted part and just wants you to weld it back together. It takes you 3 hours to weld through the rust. Yeah, that's not good. Aren't turbo cams designed to lower? Is DCR dynamic compression ratio? The answer to that is no. The dynamic compression ratio is going to happen as a result of cam timing events, but turbo cams do the way that I look at them, the way that I look at every cam is that what does that cam do NA? And then once we know what it does NA, we know what it does under boost. And turbo cams just make a different power curve than an NA cam does. And that's why I don't concentrate on it being a turbo cam or an NA cam. Bigger cams, wilder cams, cams with more overlap and stuff, not specifically turbo cams, will lower dynamic compression ratio. If you start adding duration to it and overlap, you'll lower the dynamic compression. Whether or not that's good or bad on the dynamic compression scale is a different thing. But what I can tell you is that if we add a camshaft and whatever it does NA, the boost just adds on to that. So whatever cam you put in there, whether it's a turbo cam or not, if it's soft down low, it's going to be soft down low. For some engines, 5.4 liter, it's not worth going with a mild cam because you spend $2,300 Australian on these for 10 horsepower at the top, not even increasing RPM. It would surprise me a couple things. First of all, $2,300, I wouldn't spend $2,300 on cams. Even if I got 100 horsepower, I wouldn't do that. 10 horsepower doesn't seem like a realistic change for a camshaft. I don't know what cams you're putting in there. If it's a 5.4 modular Ford, and you put even the smallest comp cam, like the 262 cam, it's going to be way more than that. It's going to be 30 or 40 or 50 horsepower on a 2-valve. I take that back. It's probably going to be more like 30 on a 2-valve. I was thinking a 4-valve. Scrolling. What happened here? Why didn't it do it as a poll? Okay, do spark plugs make a difference in power if there's no misfire? Apparently I didn't do a poll. All I did was a comment. Let's see here. Tim, did it go to 300,000? I need to do a giveaway. I was thinking about giving away the GoPed. The WAS, I got a 234, 242. That's big. My tuner keeps insisting that I change it for a blower cam before throwing a blower on the motor. I think just send her and let it eat. Yeah, just tell me what you're trying to achieve there. That's a big cam. And what kind of blower do you have? And it's going to charge hard on the big end because that's what that cam is going to do. Continuing with the turbo nitrous, do you think a 50 shot needs fuel enrichment, or do you think on such a small amount it's safe to just let the Holley closed loop compensate as it normally does? I don't ever run closed loop and have the computer compensate for stuff. Excuse me, I always run the extra fuel. What I want the thing to be like 11.5 to 1, 11.7. We'll even take 11.8. As long as it's there, even after you've added the nitrous, it's fine. I had a girlfriend once, and then she got to know me. I married mine. I married the most awesome one. Torque converter lockup speed is directly related to engine torque. So could you use nitrous to stretch the stall converter to a higher RPM? You're talking about two different things there. One is the torque converter lockup. One is the stall speed. So a lockup converter is different than the stall speed of the converter. Those are separate things. But if you're talking about the stall speed of the converter, yes, additional power changes the stall speed of the converter. Speaking of zinc, how many milligrams should we take for our health? I don't know. I take, I'm the wrong guy to ask. I take gummy vitamins, so if that tells you anything. Just dropping in to check it out. All right. Yeah, pizza, inspiration for the Olympics. Well, that's why I go work out and stuff and run, is so that I can eat pizza. The first marathon runner died. Yeah, he said victory, right? That's how the story goes. He ran the 26 miles, 385 yards, and then died. You only live once. Go for it. I'm currently building an LS3 416. How big of an injector for 900 crank horsepower? Which turbo do you recommend? Will unported LS3 heads be a restriction? The LS3 heads will not stop you from making 900 horsepower, especially on a 416. Your 416 should make 600. So it might be that you make 900 crank horsepower at like 7 or 8 pounds. So a turbo, you're going to need an S475, S480 size turbo, VS Racing 7875 Gen 2 or 3. And you're going to need, for 900 crank horsepower, 80-pound injectors are fine unless you're using E85. Then I would go bigger than that. Found an old engine rebuild book from 84. Says for engine break-in, run the engine at 2,800 to 3,000 for 30 minutes and go from idle to 6,000 slowly and back to idle for 30 minutes. I don't think I would do the idle to 6,000. But when we do a break-in cycle, what we do, our computer-controlled break-in cycles, and actually just driving the car around, if you have it in your car and you're breaking the engine in, just driving it around every day at low loads and stuff, and low RPM, 3,000 and lower, let's say, works really good to break it in. What we do on the engine dyno is we have it sweep back and forth and we vary it with load from about 2,500 to 32 or 3,300 RPM. And it cycles back and forth in that RPM range based on load. So we add more load and it brings the RPM down, and then we release the load and it goes back up. And it does that, and we can program in how much time it stays at each RPM, and then how many cycles there are. And so how long you want this to happen for. Normally we do 10 or 15 minute cycles, and we usually do 2 of those. And after that, it's usually pretty good. And it will probably continue to break in as we were doing wide open throttle stuff. So what's the best cam to use with flip pistons? A reverse pattern cam, obviously. I've noticed you don't use cam lube, or am I dreaming? Yeah, you're dreaming. We put oil on every cam that I put in, but I just put oil like when we put a LS cam shaft in, I just put oil on it, but I put oil over everything on all of the lobes and all of the cam journals. And my pet peeve, and I see this happen a lot when I go to other shops, and I also see it a lot on YouTube, is guys will take and they'll, like when they're putting a cam in, they'll set the cam on like the first journal or whatever, and then they'll just dab on the oil to all the lifters, and then they'll put it in. I don't do that. If I'm going to put oil on it, I want oil around everything. So I want it all the way around the journals, on all of the lobes, and then when I put it in, and then the lifters already have oil on them normally, because on LS, we just spin the camshaft. The lifters are held up. They still have oil on them when they go down. But when we start it up, I mean, it's a billet cam, so you're not really going to hurt it, but you want oil to be there immediately. And on flat tappet cams, like I said, we have a much more extreme procedure that we go through. Oh, lime. Okay. I really like the lime too. The orange I like, the lime I like. I don't normally get pineapple. I feel that speed difference coming off the track on a bike. You get on the freeway stuck at 70 miles an hour, you feel like, yeah, it does. Should you start with 1,000 horsepower turbo upgrade as you turn it up? What I like to do is start small and then go bigger. So that's why I run an NA motor first to make sure that the NA motor is good. And then we add the turbo. And when we add the turbo, we add it at whatever the lowest boost we can is. Normally it's like 7 pounds because we have a 7-pound spring on the gates. And so we do that, make sure it's okay. Hey, look, everything's working okay. There are no problems. There's no blow by. There's no, fuel pump sticking or bad rocker or whatever. There's all sorts of things that can go wrong. And so make sure that those don't go wrong. And then once we have the NA tune, and we have a tune for 7 pounds, we really have the tune for all the rest of it. We can extrapolate kind of from there. What I do when I'm doing tuning anyways is we take this is part of why I run the NA motor. We'll run the NA motor at wide open throttle, 5 or 6 pulls. We have whatever power that thing is going to make. And then whatever those values are, let's say we have a 2-bar map sensor in it, we take that value across those. I usually do 3 rows. We do by copy and paste the 3 rows. put them up top, double them all, and then interpolate down to the wide open throttle at NA stuff. And then what we have is we have our NA power output, and then at 1 bar, 14.7 pounds, we have twice that amount of power. And so that's going to really get us kind of close for the power output and the fuel that we're going to need. And then you just make minor adjustments from there. We'll just load it in and go, oh yeah, look, at 3,000 RPM, we're at 12 to 1. Okay, let's add a little bit of fuel because we want that to be 11. And then we start doing it at, we'll do load ins at, 3,000 or 4,000, 4,500. We're like, like it's all in the 11s. Let's just make a sweep and see what happens. And then we do a sweep. And we also, when we do that, we have our NA timing, and then we look at our boosted timing. And then obviously we have a lot less timing under boost at low RPM and a little bit more timing under boost at high RPM. But we have less boost or less timing under boost than we have NA. So if we have 29 degrees NA, depending on what kind of fuel we're going to use, maybe we only have 20 or 21 or 22 degrees of total timing once we add boost. For typical LS motors versus some backdoor ways for making power before spending money, I don't know of any magic things. Forgot about underdrive pulleys. One is worth it, and 2 is probably a good idea if you have a cam that's going to 7,000 RPM, like 5,800 the stock cam, and tune will do. I don't think underdrive pulleys are cam specific. We use underdrive pulleys a lot on the 5-liter Mustang stuff, and those are all fairly low RPM things. The one thing that you can find out is back in the 5-liter days, people got really aggressive on the amount of underdrive that they were doing on the pulleys, and you'd get to a point where the water pump wasn't spinning fast enough, like at idle and stuff. And then, like, I noticed this when we were cruising down Newport Beach in my Mustang, that when we're cruising in traffic, because this is just bumper to bumper traffic, everybody looking at the pretty girls and stuff, and the alternator didn't want to charge, the charging system didn't want to work because we didn't have enough alternator speed, and also the cooling wasn't working. We didn't have enough cooling speed at these low engine speeds, so you can go too much on these underdrive pulleys. Rich is better than lean on a turbo motor. I agree. Just got a 4.7 HO Jeep. Cool. Oh, the M90 on there, that'd be good. You can tell yourself and everyone else that you're happy with 7 pounds of boost, and then you're look at the 10s, yeah. And that's particularly true if you ever go race somebody and you lose by this much, whether it's at the track or wherever it is, and on your test track in Mexico, you lose by a car length. You're like, oh yeah, but I have a turbo and I have the ability to turn it up now, so I'm not losing the next race. And so that's what happens. Or if you take it to the track and you're running 7 pounds, and let's say, oh, I just went 1206. You're like, yeah, but it'd be really good. It's like an 1190. And so it's just like, just a little bit. And then you're like, I was at 7 this whole time. Now I'm at like 8.5. And so I went 1190s. And you're like, yeah, that feels really good. I'm just going to leave it there. And then now you're driving around at 8.5 pounds. And you're like, I'm really close. 8.5. I'm like, I'm almost at 10. So what I really need to do is be at 10. Last time I got bombarded by Axe, YouTube was sending a DOS attack on me. A DOS attack to me. I don't know what that is. And it only happens on this channel. So this is like a black site or something. I have been going down the rabbit hole recently on all sorts of the Anunnaki and different the big test site out in Utah and all this stuff. It's all fascinating. Pay for premium, never a single ad. Yep, that's good. I haven't even looked. If we've made 300,000, I got to have a giveaway. Thank you for the response. We'll use an adapter to put the LS3 intake on my cathedral heads. You'd be way better off not doing that. The adapters are not a good idea. The adapters and an LS3 intake manifold make less than an LS2 intake manifold does. I've tested that. You're better off just putting, if you don't have an intake manifold and you can do that and it's cheap, that's okay. But you're way better off just putting a truck intake manifold on there, or a Trailblazer SS, or a Fast, or a Dorman, or something like that. I was told that a 9.6 AR would cause me back pressure. I'm thinking if I should get rid of it. And Daryl, I don't remember what combination you had. I'm going to scroll back here. Daryl 5.3. No, on a S480 to 0.96, I wouldn't worry about that. You're going to need something like that to get that thing spooled anyways. Best 3-valve modular heads? I have no idea. I've only ever run ported stock modular heads. I think that the guys from Sean Highland did them way back in the day. But I haven't tested a lot of different ones, so I've been out of that particular area for a long time. Lower surge and cam surge. Have fun trying to drive it. Yeah, all of that is camshaft related. And if guys don't want the drivability issues, then you should not pick a camshaft like that. Some guys like that. Like the blower surge thing is big for big block boat guys. Like they want it to go woo, woo, woo. Like that's awful. But, you know, it looks cool. Eric, thank you very much. 1.25 would work well. Street or strip use. Kenny Bell 2.3 liter blower. Not going to lie, this car is my daily, sitting on 1099 static. 905 dynamic. I have 5 PSI and 10 PSI pulley. Just a little bit more power. Looking for 650. The blower will certainly do that if you have a big inlet going into the blower. Would a hydraulic roller cam 350, 229? Yeah, 229, even as a single pattern. They have more chop if it was a dual pattern, but a 108 LSA, a 229 will have some chop to it. Jim, man, I'm sorry to hear that. You're doing better now, though. Will porting the intake work with 706 ported heads? Curious to know. What intake are you porting? Richard, did you ever make a video using horsepower to base tune truck horse cam in a 5.3? You mean just put the camshaft in and see what it does without tuning it? Is that what your question is? If that's the question, I haven't done that. There's no assembly lube all over everything. You're not doing it right. Yeah. I know, it's even with the gloves and stuff, it's just awful. Get away, what's going on? Richard has very affordable cams. Yes, and if you're going to get them, you guys should get them now because there's going to be a price increase for the camshaft. So I have 2 of them. I have the low buck truck camshaft, which is the cam that I recommend more often than not. I have one that's bigger than that. So one's a 212, one's a 219. The 219 cam does make more power. It definitely does. But it also loses power up to about 5,000. And so if you're wanting more charge on the big end, get the truck plus. If you're wanting what most people want, then get the low buck truck camshaft. And you can get a shirt in red, wrong cam, red or azul. That's blue. Shirts are doing pretty well. Yeah, BNR, the headers do glow during break-in. I remember doing that. Built a guy a motor for the Silver State one time with a Mustang. That's a really good story. I should tell these stories during these live feeds because I think that would be fun too. 1.25 might be a bit loose. Maybe 115. Be happier with a 105. Might be too tight. I think on an S480, a 96 is going to be fine on a 5.3. Ralph, thank you. The best place to look for extra power would be deep in Richard's mind. Just imagine the possibilities. All you'd see is like squirrels and marbles and things like that, and me imagining hoping to find giant, anacondas and reticulated pythons, and probably Burmese pythons would be more realistic, but. Let's see. What is the smallest turbo you'd use on your personal car if you're running a 351 Windsor? I think on a 351, especially if it was modified at all, that I would put a GT45 on it. I don't think I would put a GT35 on a 351. I think it's going to be too small. DOS, denial of service. What is that in relation to? Cylinder head porting at home done right. More cubic inches. When you race your Mustang at wide open throttle for a long time, what airfield did you run? We were in the 11s, in the mid 11s. But I'm guessing because when I ran, I think we had air fuel ratio later on when we put the crane interceptor on there, because we're taking the air fuel reading from the factory sensors. But the first 2 years we did it with a Pro-M meter and an FMU and a pegged fuel pressure gauge at 100 PSI. So I have no idea what the air fuel mixture was. It went through a lot of fuel. Tell me about it. I ran 1102 to 1105 6 times before I got the car to go 1094. Yeah, the 1094 feels so much better, right? Only way I was able to go faster was to lift the limiter. How far did you extend it for that? Boots, blower, surge, and old school muscle car or race car is. So you like that? You like that just driving around on the street and stuff with the idle surge on that? Did that with nitrous. A 200 shot went drag bed, an 801. My condolences. Changed the shot to a 250 and went 783. See, that's good. Got my goal of under 790 with everything still in the van. 5789. That's pretty hefty. Thank you again for the response. Happy to help, Daryl. That's my brother Daryl. It's my other brother Daryl. So good. So good. Cam, would you choose for a stock 305? I have lots of 305 videos up that have our cam choices when we did stock ones. You're going to need springs on it, whatever you choose. HP tuner run through with cam. Tune tips or information. I'm the wrong guy to ask about HP tuners. I've never done anything with HP tuners and know nothing about how to tune that. Daryl, you need a cam. Send me an email. Here, I'll put my email address. Killer B16. I need to see if my shipping can go to. I've had a couple of requests from Australia, but I've had quite a few from Canada. I need to see about maybe shipping to Canada. Oh, Canada. What size fuel injectors do I need with a 5.3 ported heads, truck Norris cam, and 10 pounds of boost? After watching so many videos, I finally decided to run the turbo setup. I'm going to take a guess here. I don't have my math equipment in front of me. Truck Norris cam is 425 ported heads. Let's say that you were doing 450. So 14 would be 900. 7 would be 6 or 7, 7 or 800. I'd put 80-pound injectors in it. Do you have a cathedral port dyno chart of a mid 220 cam and a mid 230 cam looking for a crossover point? Yeah, that video is actually already up. I did a 224, a 227, and a 231 cam. And you can kind of see what all those do. Yeah, snakes. Why did it have to be snakes? How long was the 167 mile an hour average for? It was for 91 miles. Time attack, though, you want a little more top end with a manual. I'll get there quickly. I've done time attack, and I'm a road racer, so I did time attack in the Civic, and I also did a U.S. touring car in the Civic. Stock L84. But you have an L84, so you have direct injection. So that's a whole different thing. 80-pound injectors are port injected injectors. You have direct injection. So how are you getting the extra fuel to your TorqueStorm supercharger? Because you have to put you're going to have to put like an LT4 pump in there and LT4 injectors and stuff if it's a direct injected motor, which an L84 I think is just a later L83. In all fairness, it's no longer a 5.3 with a 4-inch crank. Yeah, that's what I said. I said it's going to, I mean, a 5.3 with a 4-inch crank and a 3.905 bore is a 383. But if you don't go that big in the bore, it's going to be 360, 370 or something like that. You should definitely tell your car stories. I got a lot of them. What happened running in your mate's Mustang at the Silver State? I never ran with anybody else's Mustang. I ran with my Mustang, which I still have. An original owner, 1988 5-liter LX. So I ran the Silver State in that Mustang, in my Mustang, for 12 years. Raised it from 6,800 to 7,400. Launched at 72, shipped at 7,000. Cool. And what did you go through? Did you need that far? Did you go through the lights at 74? A turbo application with a 4-barrel carb and a carb hat. If the carb was not a blow through, what would happen? You're going to have a hard time tuning it. Canada shipping is insane. I know I haven't looked at an address in Canada to get some shipping costs. You ever watched YouTube Byron Raceway Illinois World Outlaws Wheelie Contest? There was a roots blown supercharged big block wheel sander. Those are cool. It's amazing how long that they can carry those things and have them go straight. Terrible blower surge and hits the gas 9,000. Like I said, you like what you like. I mean, that's. I think it's just in the boat application. It seems like it would be harder to drive into dock and stuff. But Camaro 1st gen roots blown big block. So the Camaro go half track, front wheels off the ground. Yeah, it's amazing how straight they can go. And with the guy just seeing nothing but blue sky. Did the Civic run Bonneville? Yeah, that's what I bought the Civic for, is to run Bonneville. I drove the 99 SI. That was a Bonneville car. After we ran Bonneville, I did one thing of time attack with it, and then we turned it back into a Bonneville car. But the Del Sol that I have, that's the photo is up there. The Del Sol that I had, that was the U.S. Touring Car Championship deal that we ran, and that actually became a Bonneville car too. The guy put a K-Series in it. Do you have any good tips or rules for carb LS, street strip type applications, maybe some nitrous? Yeah, I have lots of carbureted videos up on making power with carbureted stuff. You know, the carbureted cathedral port manifolds don't seem to be anywhere near as good as the EFI manifolds do, but you can still make power with them. And we've run lots of nitrous stuff, you know, plate systems. There's lots of inexpensive ones. uncarbureted LSs, and they make good power. Power shifting, I was seeing it hit 7,300. Okay. Were you no lift shifting then, I'm guessing? Power valve circuit is restricted with a reference valve and blow through among other mods. Yeah, there's no boost reference power valve. The probably the metering is going to be off on it. A lot of times they'll work. They'll work if you enclose them, but on just a hat, a lot of times they'll work fairly well at low boost levels. But once you start trying to make power, you need a real carburetor. Boat needs to idle smoothly unless it's a Miss Budweiser. Did I tell you the story about when I helped the Miss Budweiser crew? I was responsible for saving them. They definitely had stopped in the Hills Have Eyes area, and I was able to save them and help them. And they're alive today because of me. At least that's the story that I tell my kids. I mean, looked at the poll. Do spark plugs make a difference in power if there's no misfire? No on the 53%. Yes on 47. It's already time to go. We have to end our poll. This was so much fun. Sometimes you get really good ones. May make 2 or 3 horsepower difference between plugs, but no more than that. I saw 0 when we tested it. So if it was 2 or 3, that would be nice, because then you could use those and that would give ammunition to the guys to add it up. That's what the guys did when we did the Engine Masters deal, where we did the piston flip deal. And they were like, oh, but one of them had 0.2, not even 2 horsepower, 0.2 horsepower more than the other one. I'm like, really? You're looking on that side of the decimal point for some sort of variation? You haven't dyno tested very much. No lift shifts. What do you recommend for lifters for a Godzilla on boost? I have never even seen a Godzilla motor in person, so probably not the right guy to ask. Wouldn't more electrical energy be necessary to fire a plug under very high compression pressures at high RPMs? Well, to give you an idea, we run stock LS3 coils on the Big Bang motors at 1,540 horsepower. It didn't show any sign of cutting out. All that we did was we ran the stock coils. They were stock wires. I think that the wires came from the wrecking yard. The plugs had like an 18 or 19 gap in them, and it worked just fine. C-cut spark plugs, I see a tiny gain seat of the pants. So you're registering this gain by how you feel? Yeah, I don't. You're a racer, so maybe you have the necessary feel for that. But I like to have a dyno number associated with that. Any suggestions on a blow through as far as 650, 750 for a turbo natural aspirate at 400 horsepower? So how much power are you trying to make? We use the 850 from CSU. Quick Fuel has stuff. They have 750s, I think. I don't think you need the 850 that we have for that kind of horsepower unless you're trying to make 1,000 horsepower. Looks like an LS with no valley pan. Brian Tooley has done some testing with Brian Wolf on the Godzilla stuff, and they're making some things for that. But I just have never seen one up close. On the launch, you can feel it. Okay. Like I said, I want to see what that number is. I want to see. It's like Uncle Tony when we were doing that stuff. He's, oh, but it hits the converter harder. I'm like, yeah, but you need to tell me what that means. Does it rev faster? Does it have more low speed torque? What is it you're indicating? Because that terminology doesn't show me, like, would that show it in the quarter mile? Would it, like, what is the thing that you're talking about? If it's just it feels better, that's not enough of a thing for me because I'm a data guy. My 950 wheel horsepower Subaru. First of all, if you have a Subaru that's making 950 wheel horsepower, congratulations on that. That's awesome. Between NGK and Bosch, I've tried lots of different style spark plugs, and gap obviously makes a difference on boosted applications because you get rid of misfire. But we tried different styles, multi-electrode. We tried different orientations, indexing them and stuff. And we've tried lots of stuff, and we just don't see it. When it fires, it makes the power, and all that seems to work good. GM engineers said only 90% of the gas fuel mixture made power. I think it's probably, well, the conversion rate for the amount of energy that's in the mixture is not anywhere near 90%. But is he saying he's getting 90% burn in that? Use a 650 or 750 carb to limit your peak horsepower. A 650 or 750 won't limit your power output on a blow-through application. At least not in any sort of realistic number. Took 5 years. How many motors did you go through trying to get there? That seems like a lot. I mean, the guys have lots of trouble with Subaru stuff. A buddy of mine raced Subarus, road raced them for quite a while. In fact, he was, and he still is, I think, still is the U.S. Touring Car Championship. Gary Sheehan, a good buddy of mine. And he raced one the next year in that series, and they're cool. Excel seat cuts mainly for old school engines. You can make your own with a Dremel cutoff wheel and test out NGK. So I've seen those. They have those at West Tech. We've seen the various types of electrodes. The one thing I didn't try was I don't think we tried side gap stuff, but I think that Brule did, though.
Yeah, do you want anything from Chipotle?
No, I'm good. Thanks. Okay. Is anything worth buying that's competitively priced at Napa with their current 20% discount code? I would say when we go to Napa, Westech has an account there, so we get a fairly good deal there whenever I need to go buy something. I go there usually to get my blower belts and that kind of things. But Napa is way more expensive than like the other auto parts stores are, like AutoZone stuff. Dynamite had a dyno that mounted on the rear output of the trans. Download to a laptop. 5 engines and lots of foul language. That seems pretty normal. Theory is that the C-cut allows a hotter plasma spark. If you write the Life and Time story. We have done lots of cool stuff. Yeah, again, BNR, like I know you're a racer and stuff, and that's cool. I just don't think any special electrode, any forked electrode, any multi-electrode, any center cut electrode, I don't think that makes any difference at all in power at wide open throttle. You can daily a 900 horsepower V8. Can you daily 900 horsepower import? Well, given the fact that the import, the Subaru or Honda or whatever you have, a 900 horsepower version is just going to be something that makes an ungodly amount of boost. And so you could drive it around at less boost. So I don't know why you couldn't. We could daily drive the Civic that I had that went 226. And it didn't make 900. It may have. We never tried to go that high. We made 725 or something like that. Would it be dependably durable? The Civic that I had definitely would. I wouldn't have been afraid to drive that across the United States, especially once we put the turbo on it. When I had the Vortec on it, I would be a little concerned about belts and drive and stuff. But with the turbo on it, it would have driven everywhere. If you've ever seen a piston aviation spark plug, I think I have. I think I've seen P51 spark plugs. Wider gap plugs might lower emissions. Yeah, I'm all in on the potential of gap, which I've tested, and different styles of spark plugs and that kind of things. Maybe doing something at a lower engine speed, particularly idle and part throttle, and at lower loads, lower throttle angles. I think that maybe there's something to be had there. I just don't think that at the what's going on at wide open throttle that comes into play. I was referring to your 3800 video, and you said you had to deck the block to change it to an MLS gasket. We didn't have to deck it; we just had to surface it. So all you're doing is changing the you're just changing the RA number. You're just changing the surface finish of the block. So it's a very, very minor cut to do that. Is that still the case with the 3rd Gen 5.3 that had the older style gaskets originally? Yes, if you want to run an MLS head gasket on it, it has to have the right surface finish. Richard, you need to get out and race. We don't see you run anything at the drag strip. I'm not a drag racer. I'm a road racer and a Bonneville racer. Those are different things. I think LS coils are good for 1800. Yeah, I've never made that much. I don't know. You guys probably would know more than I would. I'd have to talk to some racers that have really turned these things up. My short block turned down, had 1 bad rod bearing, 2 bad main bearings. Oh, no damage to the crankshaft. That's good. Rod bearing was on a cracked cylinder. Had water in the oil, drove 100 miles. That's good. I mean, it's not good that happened. It's good that you have some things that you can save. And on that note, it is time to go. My Fox Mustang isn't on the road. It's sitting. It's been sitting for a long time in Roswell, New Mexico, but it's just soaking up all the alien technology, because then it's going to be able to hover above the ground. And on that note, I will see you guys all tomorrow.